Friends, what an incredible week it has been. At the time of recording, we are just 1 week out from the launch of the podcast. You'll be hearing it 2 weeks after it was launched. And I have to say, it surpassed any of my wildest expectations for how well it could have gone. I'm so grateful for the community that came together around this launch, all the people who supported me, who supported this concept, people from just all different parts of my life, people who, my family, people who'd known me when I was an actor, people who'd known me when I used to wear power suits and worked in carbon capture and storage, people who knew me as an entrepreneur, people who know me as a coach, people from all around the world, and it worked. You may have heard we hit top 50 in the business rankings and top 10 in careers. Now, of course, that just feels great to my ego because I'm a human being, and seriously, actually, it's been a lot of work. It's been a lot of work getting to this point. And it's taken a lot of kind of trust and faith that I am heading in the right direction. And I just need to keep taking these baby steps and moving in the direction that feels right. So it was really gratifying to see that all come together and to see the kind of response that it got. But also, it was really kind of fun to see a podcast about regenerative work ranking so highly and ranking alongside the likes of the Goldman Sachs podcast, and a podcast called Business Wars, which I actually haven't looked into, and maybe it's more of an expose on business culture, but it just felt like a kind of amusing juxtaposition. We were up there with the BBC, we were up there with Brene Brown. It was exciting to see a podcast about regeneration and think about the people who the podcast were finding. Maybe you're one of them who, maybe haven't heard of regenerative work or have kind of half heard about it, but not really understood it. And maybe finding the podcast was the beginning of their journey out of a job that doesn't serve them, doesn't serve nature, and into regenerative work. That is my hope. Today, I'm going to share a little behind the scenes of how I got there. And I think that's a nice way for us to get to know each other a little bit, for you to hear a bit more of my story and the kind of 2-year process of bringing regenerative work life to life and my own career path. It's a messy one. I'll tell you that up front. And also what I learned from the last 2 years of exploration, what that taught me about finding purpose in our work. And I've got 4 key takeaways for you at the end, because my goal with this podcast is always to come back to practical action. I always want to leave you with something that you can actually go out and do, and tools and strategies so that you can move forward in your regenerative career. So we're going to end up with those 4 takeaways so that you can move deeper into purpose in your work. Before I go rewind and go back and take you through the last 2 years, I want to say a few words about my understanding of purpose, because I strongly feel that purpose has kind of become co-opted by hustle culture. And oftentimes the way that purpose is used is kind of to mean that we have to always strive for more, for something better. We have to acquire. We have to attain. And that is clearly counter to a regenerative mindset. That is not how I understand purpose, but that is how it tends to be talked about in the dominant culture. There's this idea, and Elizabeth Gilbert, the author, talks about this really beautifully, that we've kind of bought into this myth that each of us has this entirely unique purpose and it's out there somewhere waiting for us. And we just have to go and find it. And all 8 billion of us have this completely unique purpose that we must find. That is the whole mission of our life. And if we don't find it, then what? We've failed. We're nothing. We haven't self-actualized. And I agree with her. I think that's nonsense. And, and also what a privileged position to be in, to think that all of us can go out and seek this unique purpose. To me, purpose is not a thing. It is not a thing that we go and acquire, we go and attain. And my thinking around this also is in line with Ryan James, who you will have heard in episode 4 and episode 5. Go back and listen to that incredible conversation if you haven't done it yet. He actually has a TED talk. I think it's called, I might not get it exactly right, but essentially there's no such thing as purpose. And that it's really about connection, and our connection to nature and our understanding of our relationship with nature, that is what we're talking about when we describe purpose. So instead of thinking as purpose as this thing that you have to go and get, or as this destination that we're going to arrive at some point, I think of purpose as a feeling state, as a feeling of connection, or a feeling of alignment with your values. When the work that you do is aligned with what you believe, with the kind of world that you want to exist in, and the kind of future that you want to build for yourself, your children, for future generations, that to me is purpose. And that purpose, the exact nature of it, can change. It can change a lot. I don't think, people often say to me, oh, you've found your thing, Alyssa, you've really found your thing. I'm like, no, I've found a thing that gives me a really strong sense of purpose, but it might look very differently in a few years' time. So rather than thinking of purpose as something that we're going to go out and get, think of purpose as a way of being. Am I in purpose with my work? Do I feel purpose? And that's also something that we have to cultivate all the time, right? Like a garden, we have to look at it and we have to say, where is it getting overgrown? Where does it need watering? Where does it need feeding? Like, where is it in harmony? Where is it out of balance? And work on being in purpose all the time. So, in fact, if you take nothing else from this episode, I want you to kind of really land there with that concept. If you haven't heard purpose talked of in that way before, really give yourself some space to sit with that idea, that it isn't a single thing that you're going to acquire, a destination you're going to arrive at. It is a way of being that you're going to keep cultivating and keep moving in the direction of. Let's talk about my journey to being in purpose. Let's rewind to about 2 years. I don't want to give you my whole career background and story. I'm going to try and kind of focus in. But for context, I was an entrepreneur for the last 12, 13 years. I ran a communications agency in the climate tech space. Shout out to Life Size Media and the incredible team there. When does this actually, I'm going to go a little bit further back. I would say around the time that my twins were born, which also happened to be around the beginning of the pandemic. And I think for a lot of people, this was a real turning point. And I had a lot of space for reflection. My world had become incredibly small even before the pandemic. Twin pregnancy, not a whole lot of fun. By the end of it, I, had just no energy, really kind of struggled even to leave the house. I did a lot of just sitting in the garden, just took all my energy just to kind of breathe in, breathe out, feed myself. And there was a lot of space. And then even after the twins were born and, all of the challenges that came with doing that with a 3-year-old at home and no nursery and no support, my husband and I just doing it all on our own, our world again was very, very small. I mean, our world became for a while our home, and for that summer, really our garden. And that space really helped me to just reflect. It didn't mean that I kind of had all these like lightning bolt revelations, which is, I think, often how we think of turning points. And for some people that, that's how it works. There's a particular event in their life, maybe a birth or a death, and things just sort of switch for them. But often I think actually we only really see those things with hindsight, and they can be a lot more gradual than makes for a good story. But I realized around that time that the chapter was beginning to open up for me, and it was time for me to change. And that is when I began the process of stepping back from my role as founder and CEO at Life Size Media and putting in plans to sell that company to my team, which is what we did successfully last year. So it's now an employee-owned company, which feels wonderful. And I did all this with very little idea of what was next for me. I did not have a kind of personal succession plan whatsoever. And the one thing that I knew really, really clearly was that I was going to need to go into this next chapter without knowing what it was, without knowing the destination. I can't explain how I knew that, but that was the knowing that was coming to me from this space and from this reflection, that it was time for a new chapter and that I was going to have to move towards that without knowing what it looked like. It's a scary thing for any of us to do. And particularly, for someone like me, as an entrepreneur, you're constantly forecasting, making strategies, making plans, thinking ahead. And it was a different thing for me to have that faith to just take the next right step. And by right, I just mean what felt right. And that is exactly what I think will be asked of you if you are embarking on this transition into regenerative work. A lot of people want to know, well, what is the right job for me? What exactly does the market look like? What can I expect in terms of salary or opportunities? What organization should I look at? That's very natural. I understand that. And it just doesn't work like that, because the world of regenerative work is everywhere. It is not just work, it's work and life. It's a mindset, it's a philosophy. And the script is literally being written as we speak, and all of us are contributing to it. We all have to take steps that feel right and trust the chapter that's unfolding. So I'll give some concrete examples of what that looked like for me. But I need to tell you that none of this felt concrete while it was happening. None of it. I mean, I knew it was time for me to step out of Life Size, and I felt great about the option of moving to employee ownership. So that part was clear for me. It was quite a long process. It took about 18 months, but I knew what I was doing with that. Clear to me, the ending of the previous chapter I had taken care of. How the new chapter was starting, I really didn't know. And I'll come on to, as I go through this, some of the takeaways that I want to share with you, because I think it's helpful to hear it in the context of my story, and then I'll recap them at the end. But one of my takeaways is that you just have to trust your curiosity. You have to trust the things that kind of catch your attention, spark your interest, and follow them and pursue them without needing to understand how they make sense. And that concept is very much something that was taught to me by the wonderful Martha Beck. So if you don't know Martha Beck, she's a life coach. She was kind of one of the first people to be described as a life coach. She did a lot of work with Oprah Winfrey, and she's written many, many books around following your North Star, your internal compass. And I was introduced to Martha's books. I really enjoyed them. I must have signed up at some point to an email list, and then I started getting these emails about coach training. And I remember so clearly the first time I got this email thinking, why the hell is Martha Beck trying to sell me coach training? I did not come here to be sold life coach training. I came here because I love your books. I love your concepts. I'd actually read one of her books, which is not really related to coaching at all. It was about the birth of her son. And I just could not understand why I was being sold life coaching. But I didn't delete the email, and I didn't unsubscribe. And the emails kept coming. And then before I knew it, I'd signed up to go onto this Zoom Q&A call about signing up for this life coach training, which was a big deal. It was a year-long course. It was a very significant investment. It would mean a lot of time and work at a time, when I had like 6-month-old twins at home. And I just told myself, well, I'm just going to see. I'm just going to show. I just want to be at the Q&A. It'd be fun to hear Martha talk. And that's exactly what I mean by following your curiosity. Because if I had applied a sort of logical, rational decision-making process here, I would not have gone on that call. I knew, you can't, if you're not watching on video, I'm doing some bunny ears here. I knew, by which I mean my logical brain knew I did not want to become a life coach. I wanted to go on that call. My body knew that I wanted to go on that call. So as far as you can, within, the confines of your responsibilities and your resources, trust those curiosity instincts and just follow those paths and see where they might take you. And the more you can let go of the part of your brain that wants to go, yeah, okay, but how does this tie in with your previous experience? Or how is this going to get us into the next job or the next stage in my career? Like, try to just let all that noise go and just go, you know what? I'm just interested. I just want to have that experience. I just wanted to be on that call and be in a space with Martha. I had no intention of signing up for the coach training. Sure enough, the deadline came up for signing up for the coach training, and I remember finding myself hovering over the pay now button, pretty significant investment, and thinking, I don't know why I'm signing up for this. And, when I say, so I had to discuss this investment with my husband. We'd had to set up a plan so that he could look after the babies and my son on the days when I needed to be on the call and give me time so that I could do the homework. Like, there was a lot that went into this, and I still wasn't going to be a coach, but I signed up for the training. I just wanted the experience, and I let that be enough. And so I started the training, and I very quickly realized not only did I love coaching, because I really thought I was just there for myself to be coached, to have that experience, but I realized I loved coaching, and I realized I was good at it. And so I went through the course. I learned a lot of incredible tools that I still use all the time today, but also that I've used personally to guide my journey and that I use for clients. And a lot of it is about trusting what brings you joy, trusting your curiosity, trusting your body. We'll talk a lot more about all of those themes in different episodes. So I certified as a coach with Martha. That meant doing quite a lot of hours and going through certification process. And I knew still clearly what I'd known before. I did not want to become a life coach, but I did love coaching. So I just coached anyone who kind of I connected with, that where we found that there was like a mutual relationship where we were interested. I coached people on all kinds of different things in a very kind of haphazard, kind of hobbyist, if I'm honest, kind of way. And I guess by this point, it was getting close to completing the sale of Life Size and, more space was opening up for me. And then there was definitely a sort of an element, a little bit of panic of, right, shouldn't I know a little bit more about this next chapter by now? I really thought like the pieces were going to have come together at this point, and they hadn't. So, you know, I had these skills, but didn't know what I wanted to do with them. Kept sort of trying to find, like, maybe there's some kind of version of life coaching that I want to do. No, none of it felt right to me. And I was getting this advice as well that just really now makes me laugh, because I can see that it was good advice, but it didn't connect at the time, around, you know, just build your business around what you love. And I was like, well, I love gardening. Like, how do I build a coaching business around gardening? And they're like, okay, well, maybe not specifically around gardening, but like, how can you infuse gardening into your work? And I was like, I just don't even know what that means. Really funny to me now that makes total sense, but at the time I didn't see it. And there were a few more kind of formative experiences along the way, and all of them felt silly. Didn't feel silly, but the things where I really began to find my path, they all had an element of frivolity to them. And actually, how I would describe that now is that they were all playful. And this is one of the other takeaways that I really want to share with you is play. Let yourself play. Let yourself be silly. Oh my goodness, could anything be more counter to corporate culture than to allow ourselves to play as we explore and evolve our careers? And playing just purely for the sake of it, not playing like with a notebook by the side to take notes of exactly what we learned from the play experience, just play. And I can tell you now that those times when I let myself play, I'm going to come and tell you about a few of them in a moment, were absolutely formative to what I do now. And some of them were just the silliest, most awkward that I felt along the way. I would say that the further away that they felt from something that felt sensible and like progress, and that, you know, that I could sort of talk about confidently, the further away they were from those kind of rational, logical markers of progress, the more they actually informed where I am today. So I'll give you two examples. One is that I went on a forest bathing experience. If you've never heard of forest bathing, it's simply about being in nature, about being in a forest and deepening your connection with nature. Now, you now know what I do with Regenerative Work Life. I help people to root their careers in nature, climate, and community. I literally help people bring their careers closer to nature. But at the time when I went on this forest bathing course, I just had no idea what I was doing. It was one of those things, again, it popped up. It was actually for forest school leaders. I'm not a forest school leader. And I think it was part of my local wildlife trust. And I just saw it and was like, I need to be there. I need to be there. I remember actually there wasn't a place, and I emailed them and said, like, can I go on a waiting list? And there was an extra space that popped up. Like, I really wanted to be there, even though I could not explain why. And I remember feeling so uncomfortable when I was going there. I remember thinking, they're all going to be forest school teachers and have no idea why I'm there. I can't even explain what it is I do because I have no idea what it is that I do. And like, what if it just feels really awkward to do this sitting in nature business? Like, I was really uncomfortable. And then I had just one of the best days of my life. It was just the most beautiful, profound experience. And it's simply profound. It was just, I just loved it. I loved it. And I was like, being in connection with nature, and I want to help people have that experience. But again, I knew I didn't want to be a forest bathing guide. And I remember also that there were a lot of voices in my head around this time of, Alyssa, you've really kind of lost the plot at this point. This is what like the sort of corporate narrative, the dominant culture narrative in my head was telling me. You've really lost the plot. You are sitting in a woodland, like talking to a tree. Like, are you really telling me that you're going to have a successful career as a forest bathing guide? Do you think you make any money as a forest bathing guide? This is what was happening in my head. But I managed to recognize enough that that was not a voice that was there to help me, and to create some space from it and just let myself have these experiences. I'll give you an example of another one, which again makes a lot of sense with hindsight. I began to do day retreats. I still do them occasionally. And I remember the first time was when I was actually, again, there was a forest school link. I was at forest school with my kids and I was talking to another mum, and she was saying about just how overwhelmed she was feeling. And I said, you know what we need? I was like, we need forest school for grown-ups. And she was like, yeah, you should do that. And so I did. I created day retreats that were essentially forest school for grown-ups. And a lot of parents came, and like busy, stressed out parents. And we did forest bathing. We literally played in the woods. I set up play invitations and had the like unparalleled joy of watching grown-ups play in the woods. And we did, body work and relaxation and all kinds of things. And while that is not the core of what I do, it is very much a kind of, I was going to say side hustle. Those are the wrong words, but it's a sort of hobby on the side of what I do, because I really do love literally being in nature with people and helping people to have experiences in nature. But again, I knew this can't be it. Like I don't really see this. I can remember the first time I even had the thought of holding a retreat and was like quite disgusted by the idea. I remember like just identity wise, I was like, I'm a CEO, I'm a business person. I fought really, really hard to be taken seriously as a business person, to earn my seat at that table. And now I'm like playing in the woods with people. What the hell is going on? And another playful example, and this will be my last one, was that with my coaching, I really knew that I wasn't there yet with the kind of coaching that I wanted to do. I knew it was going to be some form of coaching, but I really wasn't there with what I wanted that to look like. So I just started doing playdate coaching, I think coaching in the wild. That's what I was calling it, coaching in the wild. And I sent people who inspired me in some way and who were local to me invitations to do coaching in the wild. And I remember I had a coaching session in a eucalyptus grove, coaching in our local woods. And I would bring tea, like herbs, dried herbs and spices to make tea, or I'd bring like rose hip syrup that I'd foraged, and we put out a blanket and we would coach in the wild. And all this time, the entrepreneur part of my brain was like, well, this is okay, fun, Alyssa, it's fun. And yes, your clients are having really good experiences. They're giving you fantastic feedback. But where's the business, Alyssa? Like, where does this come together into something that makes sense? And, for goodness sake, Alyssa, you've been an entrepreneur for 13 years. You know how to build company culture. You know how to build a successful business. You know how to brand, how to market. And we're sat in the woods with herbal tea. This is the kind of internal struggle that was going on. And actually, one of those clients, after I launched the podcast, she sent me a message with a picture of us sat in that eucalyptus grove. And she said, it all makes sense now, doesn't it? And she was absolutely right. It does. All of those things made sense to me. But I've got to tell you, and I want to really bring this home, at the time, I felt like I was getting so, so lost. I felt like I was increasingly leaving the path of kind of sanity and doing it with choice, right? Doing it, like choosing it, but being quite alarmed at the choices that I was making. And there were days when I would just be kind of in my kitchen with like foraged ingredients or like writing poetry in the woods and thinking, I'm just turning into this like witch woman. And now it's all come together. And it just, to pinpoint exactly when it came together, it was when I was ready to return to the idea of business. I wasn't for a long time because I had a lot of detoxing and deschooling to do. I've been an entrepreneur for 13 years. I'd worked very hard, very long hours. I'd shouldered a lot of responsibility. My life was very, very closely intertwined with my business, and I needed space from that. But around the beginning of this year, beginning of 2024, I was ready. I was ready to reconnect with the entrepreneurial side of myself. I was ready to see my work as a business again, to take it very seriously and bring everything I'd learned from play and exploration and curiosity and marry that up with all of the deep experience that I had. And again, I want to give you the confidence, if you're already in this process, or you're about to take the leap into this process of letting yourself get lost, letting yourself play and explore and be curious and not be able to rationally explain what it is you're doing in this time, you are not going to lose the things that you've worked hard for so far in your career. They will be there waiting for you when the time is ready. And when you can bring together what you're good at, what you have expertise and experience in, with what you love, with what lights you up, with really who you are, and with a deep connection to the earth, that's where the real magic happens. And that magic for me unfolded at the beginning of this year. It's by itself. I worked with several different coaches and guides. I'm extremely grateful for their wisdom and their influence. But it very quickly came together for me, very quickly. Once I was ready, once the time was right and I was ready to take it seriously and to bring those two sides of myself together, I knew really quickly what it was I wanted to do, who I wanted to do it for. And that's how Regenerative Work Life was born. I knew I wanted to help people connect their careers back to nature. And I knew specifically that I wanted as much as possible to help people who were either currently stuck in or had recently left the corporate world. And I felt very strongly about the power and impact that we can collectively have when we divest from corporate and we come back to ourselves and we commit our careers to nature. And so that is what I do with Regenerative Work Life. And that is the journey I invite you to take alongside me, because I'm still learning all of the time. So let's summarize. If you are a paper and pen kind of person, get your paper and pen right now. Let's get tactical. Let's give you action and homework that you can go and put into practice. Let's get inspired, but then let's take action. So I've got 4 takeaways for you that I really want you to hold on to and to use to give you courage to go into this process. So number 1, the first thing you have to do is give yourself time and space for this transition. And that is going to look different for everybody. One of the things I highly recommend is to make some kind of financial plan to do this. You may already have some resources set aside. You may not. You may have different streams of income. You need to look at what is going to be possible for you from a financial point of view, and where your kind of, risk tolerance level is, so that you can really give yourself the longest period that is possible. I'm going to go into exactly how you can build that financial plan for your transition in a future episode, but you can also get guidance on that from my free guide, How to Progress Your Regenerative Career Without Yet Quitting Corporate. That's available on my website. Just go to the homepage, you'll see the guide. And in there, I have a kind of step-by-step process for how you can build that financial plan. Or you can also get it at regenerativeworklife.com/guide. So the first thing is, give yourself that time and space. For most people, that means having a financial plan in place, but also think about what else you might need to set up in your life to really support that. Who do you need to have key conversations with to say, I am going into this process and I need your support in that. Okay, number 2, not something most of us grown-ups are good at, or we think that play is sport, right? It's not. I'm talking about creative play. I'm talking about the kind of pure play that you see in children, where they explore stuff just for the sake of exploration. They do not have a fixed outcome in mind. If you see a child in a pure state of play, they may temporarily be trying to see, well, what happens if I put these blocks in it? But it is not about, for them, it is not about the finished, accomplished, final thing. Often we as grown-ups project that onto children when they're playing. We're like, oh, you built a castle from your blocks. But if you watch a child carefully when they are playing independently, the joy that they are getting is from the process of putting those blocks together. What is it like when a red block goes next to a yellow block? Can you put a circle block on top of a triangle block? That is pure play. And I want you to try to find play in your regenerative career transition. Number 3, trust your curiosity. Your curiosity is the best guide you can have in this period. Like, what just sparks something for you, switches something on, right? The less sense it makes, the better. If all of a sudden you're like, I don't know, I need to press flowers. I like desperately want to know about pressing flowers. Oh my goodness, go out and press some flowers, right? Just let it not make any sense, right? Trust yourself. And that can be hard to do. And again, we can go into more detail in future episodes about exactly how you kind of can switch away from over trusting the logical, rational mind and learn to trust your deeper wisdom. But for now, what I would say is when you feel it in your body, you can trust it. You will know, right? When something just kind of lights you up, or you have like a floaty feeling or a warm feeling, when it feels expansive in your body, trust that. Follow that curiosity without needing to make it make sense. Number 4, be conscious of your thoughts. Okay, this is the part where we really need to look after our nervous system to go through this process with resilience. As I've given you several examples from my story, all along the way, there were times when there was part of my internal dialogue, very loud part, being like, Alyssa, what are you doing? You are just messing around. You are getting lost. You are wasting time. Always a big one. You are wasting money. You are not being productive. You are not moving forward. Nobody understands what it is you're doing. You're going to become irrelevant. All of these things, okay? Those are not your voice. If you want to, get into the question of whose voice they are, because it might help you, okay? Often that voice is the dominant culture that tells us that we need to grow exponentially, that we need to be ever productive, that we always need to move forward, that there is a destination that we need to get to, okay? Watch out, find out whose voices those are. You know, and you can like really lean into it a little bit if you want to go deeper with this. I love the work of David Bedrick around unshaming. Look him up. It's been really, really special for me. And he has this one beautiful exercise. I'm going to leave you with this if you want to try it. When one of those kind of thoughts comes up, instead of trying to push it away, accept it and move into it. I'm going to give you a concrete example. We're finished with this. So one of the kind of shameful thoughts that came up for me again and again was, I'm getting lost. I'm getting lost. So I'm going to really summarize David's work here. I really recommend that you check him out and go deeper into it. But what David would suggest is, okay, so go and get lost. Like, how can you lean into that discomfort, that thought that doesn't feel good, right? That idea that doesn't feel good, and go through it, right? Because as it says on this card behind me, the way out is in. So how can you move into that discomfort? And one day I did literally that. I let myself get lost. I dropped my older son at school. My kids were in nursery, and my intention was just to cycle and just see where I ended up. And so I began cycling. And I just went with, oh, this road looks interesting. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to go that way. And then I remember thinking, someone told me about this woods that I've never been to. I've been here 10 years. I've never been to this woods. I'm going to see if I can find it. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to just get my phone out. My plan was to put my phone on, on airplane mode so that I wouldn't be disturbed. But I'm just going to get my phone out and just check where this wood's out. And then I realized that I hadn't bought my phone because the universe was taking me really seriously when I said I was going to get lost. And I had to find it through my instinct and through exploration and going down little paths and along the railway tracks. And then I found this wood, and I walked around this wood, and I climbed into a tree, and I wrote a poem for the first time in many years, and it came to me fully formed, the entire poem. If you're curious, send me a message and I will send you a link to the video of this poem, because I later recorded a performance of it in the same tree. Again, even just saying that, I'm like, oh, that's a little bit embarrassing, right? This just isn't this is not sort of thing you're going to take seriously. But getting lost was important. It unlocked so much creativity for me. And the concepts in that poem have been really important guidance for me. This is the thing about regenerative work. It does not always make sense. It is not a linear, logical process. It involves leaning into discomfort. It involves trusting joy and curiosity and play. It is a process of self-actualization. And I'm so delighted that you are here for that journey with me.